Hello and welcome. We begin with the big focus on Kenya. The East African nation is once again on the brink of chaos and mayhem. Tensions are simmering in Kenya once again as the William Ruto government plans to reinstate some of the scrapped controversial taxes. In a television interview, Kenya's Finance Minister John Mbadi said the government is considering reinstating about 49 tax measures. These include the reintroduction of an eco-levy, which will increase prices of electronic items, diapers and other goods. The finance minister insisted that unlike the initial proposal, this one will exclude sanitary pads. The government says the measure is aimed at reducing waste. More importantly, it says bringing back the scrap tax measures will help the debt-ridden Kenyan government raise about $1.2 billion. The government says these measures were needed to pay for expenditure, including wages for teachers. The government also aims to collect more taxes by extending the tax amnesty period by 6 months. Now, after the announcement, protest groups in Kenya say they are ready to hit the streets again. In June, deadly protests and violence plunged Kenya into anarchy. Protesters even stormed into the country's parliament. At least 50 people were killed and thousands were injured in the countrywide protests. These protests forced William Ruto to abandon the finance bill that proposed new taxes and hikes to raise over $2 billion. Bowing to pressure, the president was even forced to dismiss most of the cabinet. The protesters said the proposed tax hikes would pile on pressure on the citizens who are already struggling with skyrocketing cost of living. The Kenyan government is stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one hand is the competing demands of the citizens to reduce the financial burden. On the other are lenders such as the International Monetary Fund who are urging Kenyan government to cut deficits to obtain more financing. After scrapping the contentious finance bill, the Ruto government reassessed the budget to explore alternative revenue sources. It cut government spending, but the fiscal deficit widened further. Global ratings agencies such as Moody's and Fitch downgraded Kenya's rating over concerns about the government's ability to service its debt. Kenya's public debt ratio almost doubled from 41% of the GDP in 2014 to a projected 78% of GDP in 2024. The government says its hands are tied as the country struggles to repay its huge debt burden. Kenya's domestic and foreign debt was a staggering $80 billion last year. So President William Ruto and his cabinet are at a fork in the road, and any decision they make is likely to have direct implications on the economy and peace in Kenya. Now, for more on this, we have with us Stella Agara, governance and security analyst and a tax justice activist. She joins us live from Nairobi. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, what led to President Ruto's decision to reintroduce the scrap tax measures? What alternatives were considered before deciding to bring back these tax measures?
I think one of the realizations that we are coming to right now is that the president did not understand the seriousness of the protests that we had in Kenya recently. He has not internalized the plight of Kenyans, and he has not internalized the issues that Kenyans are facing. He still insists on taxing a population that does not have the capacity to pay more than it's already paying. As we speak now, he has now appointed a government that is calling a government of national unity, a government that has included some representatives from the opposition, including the person who's currently sitting on the seat of the cabinet secretary for treasury. Unfortunately, he has not come with any creative ideas. He has not come with anything new, and he's reverting back to the policies that were scrapped. This gentleman was in parliament and he voted against the finance bill. So one of the questions Kenyans are asking themselves is what has now changed because he's now sitting in that seat in treasury to begin with. Was he just playing politics when he was in parliament? Was he just playing to the gallery when he was in parliament? We also know that the president thinks that at this point he has consolidated power, so he can practically, dismiss Gen Z and show them that there's nothing they can do in this country. But that's going to be one very big mistake by this government and by the president, because I don't think he understands the agency around which Kenyans have decided they will suffer no more.
And Stella, exploring the potential effects on businesses, households and government revenue, how will these reinstated taxes impact the Kenyan economy and, of course, its citizens?
I think, first of all, for example, if you talk about the glaring eco-levy tax, it targets imported goods, it targets goods coming from sources that are outside of the Kenyan market. One of the issues that the government should have considered when making this decision is the fact that Kenya depends heavily on imports, an error that exists because of the policies that have been made over time by the government that did not allow industry to thrive and eventually caused Kenya to be heavily dependent on imports. So if you impose an eco-levy tax on everything that is coming from outside the country, you're basically saying that this tax is still going to be transferred to the citizens. The Kenyan population is also a huge consumer economy, and so they're going to be buying heavily from the things that are coming from foreign markets, and then these are going to be subjected to tax. The sanitary towels were one area, and if you remove the sanitary towels, there are many other essential goods that we import and use as a country that are going to have this eco-levy imposed upon them, which still means that the burden is still coming back to the Kenyan. Unfortunately, this is happening at a time when more corruption cases have been exposed in this government. There's a gentleman called Morara Kebaso who single-handedly been showing us some of the projects that the government has been neglecting or has claimed to have invested resources in that have not been completed. Where has that money gone to? How can that money be recovered and be invested into the economy before they come back into the pockets of Kenyan citizens? The state has also decided to be very irresponsible about how they care for the lowest people in our society. And so these taxes are going to be imposed to that consumer, to the person who needs these goods the most. Unfortunately, this is not going to work for our economy.
Right. And Stella, what steps will the government take to address the public concerns and also the potential protests, considering the previous outcry and those devastating protests in June?
One of the steps that they must take is engaging in public participation, and there were some of the petitions that were in court and litigation that was in court just before the rejection of the finance bill were about the procedure that was used to even bring the finance bill to parliament. In the Constitution of Kenya and the laws of Kenya require that there be public participation, that they considered input from the citizens, and if they reject or ignore any of the input from the citizens, then they are required to explain why they have rejected some of the input from the citizens. Unfortunately, the process previously had not met this threshold. If they are going to embark on this process, then they will be required to ensure that the process is above par. The second is that they will have to contend with the fact that the same citizens they are going to are the ones who say they do not want this finance bill. They have been unequivocal about the fact that they will not listen to any conversation about the finance bill. And so they'll also need to do a bit of convincing and persuasion to convince Kenyans that this is what makes sense, alongside convincing them that these are the only measures, aside from the issues of corruption that have been seen in the country. The last thing that I guess they would have to do is to seriously pay attention to the voices of Kenyans and ensure that then they're also monitoring what other arms of government are doing. Today, the Supreme Court of Kenya has suspended the ban on some of those taxes, which means the government can continue taxing even as they wait for the process in court to be completed. Kenyans are not happy about this. If you check some of their feedback already, they're very unhappy about this. They're very unhappy about the conduct of the courts concerning this. This is fueling a lot of negative energy amongst the citizens in a country that is already in a very volatile state. And so they'll have to exercise a lot of precaution to ensure that they maintain the fabric of our nation, even as they embark on this process of trying to get taxes. But then they'll also have to engage in a final assignment of ensuring that then we reconsider completely our borrowings. We reconsider what we are spending on. If we do not have sufficient resources to feed Kenyans, we should not be the ones who are planning for all kinds of huge constructions, cement towers that eventually may not necessarily benefit Kenyans who do not have the resources to use them at the end of the day.
Right. Stella, thank you very much for being with us on First Post Africa and for your valued insights on all the latest coming out of Kenya.
Thank you for having me.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity, one tree for Mother Earth, one tree for our future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
On the today, the T20 World Cup bandwagon has moved across to the West Indies. What can we expect